Tonight we get to do a little Q&A. As always, you guys have submitted your questions in our question box on our website. Since we don't do social media Q&As anymore, you can find that link down below. We're going to talk about our thoughts on the latest Taylor Swift album, on, mother-in-laws, on Courtship, on a lot of fun things, limiting family size. So anyways, Elisha doesn't even know what we're going to cover in this episode. But feel free to give this video a thumbs up and like it, or leave a rating or a review on iTunes, Spotify, wherever you listen. Those help get this podcast out to more people, or just tell someone about it. You know, if you can't figure out the technical stuff, you probably found out about this podcast by someone you loved and respect telling you about it and letting you know you would be encouraged. So we're all about word of mouth here too. And we love when you guys share it with friends.
The Now That We're a Family podcast.
I have to admit, Katie, you really caught me off guard with some of those topics that we're going to be covering in today's episode. I wasn't aware. We didn't talk about that beforehand. So.
No, we didn't. But I mean, we'll see.
Well, we will. We will see. We'll see.
I make big promises and then Elisha delivers on them.
Sorry about that, folks. I was unprofessional. My phone just started ringing, and then I just answered it. We ran a credit check, I don't know, like a week ago or something. And I don't know how this all works legally, but apparently the entire world sees that we run a credit check.
Yeah, we've been getting cold called from dawn till dusk.
Yeah, literally. I mean, probably 80 calls a day, 100 calls a day.
Yeah.
Just call after call after call after call of different lenders, different brokers. It seems like everybody in the financial industry.
Yeah, we're like 4 days out, and I'm just kind of wondering, or maybe 5 or 6 days out.
Yeah, it's been a while.
And they're still going.
Yeah.
Anyways, I'm sorry if you're in that industry. That would really stink to be this, 250th call that someone's getting at 6:30 in the morning. To be that caller, and that's what you do for work. So props to you for doing that hard stuff. Okay. So, before we jump into today's episode, we wanted to let you guys know about the 6 Songs of Summer Challenge. And we did get a question in here that's not going to pertain to everybody, but like, what age would you start a child? On what instrument would you start a child? And in our home, we've gone with the fiddle, but the fiddle runs in the family. So all the cousins were doing that too. Piano is a great place to start. But on VotebergMusicAcademy.com, we're doing our 6 Songs of Summer Challenge, where every week, all the kids at all the different levels, and adults too, learn the same songs together in the studio and post videos of everyone sharing it together. And it's just a lot of fun. Everyone who participates earns $10 and a badge. And it's one of the highlights of the year in the VMA studio. So if you want to join us on that, or if you're just curious to check out Voteberg Music Academy for your child, then now is a great time to do it, because you're going to see a lot of other students. Even if you aren't participating in 6 Songs of Summer, it's really fun to see the other students participating too. So we do have a link for you to join down below.
Yeah, I think it's down below.
Yeah, there's a code for you guys to join as listeners of the podcast. So anyways, just wanted to put that out there. It's starting next week, so this is the last time we get to tell you about it.
Well, Katie, I'm on pins and needles.
Okay, all right, let's jump in.
Okay.
Do you have any thoughts on the latest Taylor Swift album?
Oh, okay. I mean, honestly, no. I don't. I have not heard a song. I have not read about any of the songs. I've got zero thoughts.
That was my thought too when I read this question. Right? I was like, I have zero, I am so far out of the pop culture scene, a decade removed. Since I got married to Elisha, I was like, I found my person. I don't need to listen to pop songs anymore and fantasize about finding them.
Wow.
Or breaking up. Or that's like,
That was your main motivation in listening to pop music?
I mean, they're all love songs or breakup songs, or I think that's pretty much it, actually. Yeah. What do you think?
I don't know. I don't know if I ever consistently listened to pop music. It would just be on, and so I would listen to it, I guess, because other people were listening to it. I will say this. Okay, I just remembered how I even knew that Taylor Swift had an album. I was listening to NPR, and that you folks know I like NPR. And at one point, I don't know how many songs it was, but it was some record where she held the number one spot from 1 to like 10 or something on the Billboard top 100 or something. So I knew that from this most recent album.
Yeah, well, I'm not surprised. She's quite the metastar. But yeah, it's just like basically we just don't listen to pop music in our home. And I don't think it's worth keeping up on either. So I know everyone's like doing a breakdown. So everyone I like follow online is doing a breakdown of her album, and I assume it's because it's popular content, but I don't really care because it's not really relevant. So
yeah, that is the interesting thing whenever it's people that I enjoy listening to I enjoy listening to them oftentimes because they are not culturally relevant, if that makes sense, or at least that's how I perceive them to be. And so whenever they choose to cover pop culture things or culturally relevant things, I lose interest. I'm like, I'm listening to you or I'm reading you because I don't want to read about Taylor Swift or listen.
yeah, like that's what everyone else in the media is like covering. And it's really nice when someone's just like good at a topic and they're just going to talk about like real estate investing, like every time you listen to them, or, parenting every time. And they aren't going to bring in a cultural topic like we are today, but we really have no thoughts. So that's it.
Wow. Anticlimax. I didn't know if it was going to be more of a specific question about Taylor Swift, but yeah.
Did you want to get into specific thoughts on Taylor Swift?
No, I mean, I don't know if I'm ready to admit this on air because I don't know if we've already talked about this, but because it is kind of embarrassing retrospectively, but I think enough time has passed in my life.
I think you've mentioned this on the show before.
Oh, I have? Okay. So it's not news to anybody.
But we've had a lot of new listeners since then, so you can go ahead and confess.
This was, again, I wasn't ever a fan of Taylor Swift. I wasn't, like, I knew she existed and I would know when a song would come on of hers, right? And like my sisters would have playlists or my brothers would have playlists and a Taylor Swift song would be maybe on it. But then one of my younger brothers became somewhat fanatical about Taylor Swift, and I knew that
It's his 1 weak spot.
it might be. It's like I'm like I have so much admiration for this brother in like every category of life, but this one area, I'm like, sorry, I just can't respect this area about you. But at this time, I was like, oh, I'm going to get him a birthday gift. I'm going to get him Taylor Swift concert tickets. And so I got one for him and one for me. And it was the 1989 tour. So whenever whatever year that was. This was way pre-marriage and all that stuff. It was, I think I was like 12 or 13 or something. And so I got him tickets and I took him to the concert. And again, it was one of those things where it's like, what was I thinking? You know, that's not something that I would ever want to endorse. It's one thing, like I went to a U2 concert and that was, I could stand behind that a little bit more, you know, like as far as, again, they're an iconic band and I enjoyed that experience. But as far as big arena concerts go, I was like, what was I thinking doing that? Like, I wasn't aware of, I think, Taylor Swift, who she was, what she even represented. And
well, I think this is it. I think Taylor Swift got grandfathered into a lot of Christian circles because she has this like girl next door, like innocent vibe to her. And she really started out that way and has maintained it throughout her whole career. Even when she like does her edgy stuff or whatever, she always comes back to this like, oh, and I'm just your best friend and I'm just chill. Because it's like no Christian guys you would respect would like go to a Britney Spears concert or like a Madonna concert or like, but I feel like they all go to Taylor Swift, or a lot of them did.
They all do?
Well,
whoa,
a lot did, or like girls would take their husbands or whatever. And I majorly do not respect Elisha for doing that. And I still kind of hold it against him.
I don't blame you for that either.
I would be really bummed out if that was a decision that our boys made with any female pop star they went to our concert.
Same. Yeah, it was a genuine mistake. It was a misstep in my life. And I acknowledged that soon afterwards. I think I acknowledged it in the moment. Or you're like, first off, when you're standing in line to go in, this was in Seattle and it was like where the Seattle Seahawks play. And you're standing in line and you just look at the general demographic and quickly you realize you're out of place. You're like, one thing's not like the other here, you know, and it's my brother and I standing in line here. Like, what are we doing? And so we probably should have just called it there.
This is the funny thing though. This was during the summer when Elisha kept asking me out and I kept saying no. So we'd already talked the first time. He'd already broken up with his other girlfriend, and we were talking now. And I was like, our values just don't align. And one of the big things was that summer he had gone to the Taylor Swift concert. And I was like, I don't want the father of my children, like, especially my sons, advocating being involved in pop culture like this. And I know I'm making it a big deal, but like, it was a really big deal.
I think it's becoming a bigger and bigger deal retrospectively the further away from that event that I get. Like, the regret grows. I'm like, what was I thinking?
Honestly, it was fine. I had nothing to be. Elisha and I were very aligned on that. It was just like, I don't know. It sounded like a fun thing to do as a 20-year-old guy or whatever. But then we started dating, and he still had like the light bar thing on your.
I think it was like a bracelet.
Yeah, like a light bracelet that he wore at the concert on his stick shift thing, and I just took it and threw it out.
Yeah, which I did.
And we were on a date, and he's like, you noticed? You're like, where's my bracelet? And I was like, it's in the trash.
Yeah, it was an emblem of like my need to repent every time I got in the car. I was like, just a reminder of how much I'm dependent on God's grace. Like,
oh man. Anyways. Yeah, that's it. Like, I was a big fan of, I wasn't ever like a fan of Taylor Swift, but I 100% during like my teen years, single years, listened to her music all the time. It was just around, and I did listen to quite a bit of pop music, like between 18 and 21 when I got married. And I just kind of like didn't care anymore. The old sweet country songs, though, those have gotten sweeter with marriage.
No doubt.
I listen to those more, and I just bawl. Elisha and I, we just cry in the car, and our kids are like, what's your problem?
There's this one old country station here in North Idaho that plays a lot of good classic country. In fact, it was jarring to me the other day because I was listening to more, I don't know if it was modern country music or just more raunchy country music. I'm like, oh man, like, this is not appropriate at all. I need to be careful who I tell that I love country music to, because the station that we listen to and the stuff that you and I listen to, I mean, to me, it's just like so wholesome and so, emotional.
Yeah, it's like the good parts of life.
Yes.
But yeah, when you say country music, there's like a big divide. It can mean two very different things.
Yes.
Okay, so there's your little pop tidbit from the Voperks.
That was fun.
Exciting. Okay. Hi there. Love the podcast. It's been a blessing to me. I would love some advice. My mother, who is a professing Christian, will agree that children are a blessing, but in the same breath say she's good to not have any more grandchildren for a while, meaning she doesn't want me to get pregnant soon. She does help out a couple times a week with my sisters, 3 young kids, and watches my 11th-month-old for 8 hours one time a week. She certainly is an involved, helpful grandmother, but his attitude is discouraging when it comes to having children. She only had 2 kids herself. Any advice or prayers welcome. I would love to have a big family, and I wish I had her full support and encouragement.
Wow. That's awesome. You want to have a big family.
Yes.
I mean,
that's great.
Obviously, we're advocates of that. And it's pretty cool you have a mother that's involved. I mean, real quick. So her mother helps her sisters with her sister's kids 2 times a week.
3 young kids twice a week, and washes her baby 8 hours once a week, and says kids are a blessing, but she's also good to not have any more grandchildren for a while.
Well, I mean, I can't blame the grandma for this.
No.
She's, basically working a full-time job again. You know, it's
she wants to be a grandma, not a mom, and she's mothering 4 children weekly.
Wow.
That is a huge job for a grandma, and she's not allowed to be grandma mode.
Right.
She's in parenting mode.
Yeah, just caretaking, parenting. Yeah, so I don't know what the circumstances are that have led to that schedule. You know, again, this could just be your mother initiating that, like going above and beyond, be like, hey, I want to take them on this day, I want to take them on this day, and then I want to take them on yours. Or if it's, you know, your current work schedule or just your school schedule. I don't know what the context is, the scenario is that's lending to this schedule, but I mean, that's a lot of mothering for a grandmother to do.
Yeah.
I think that's probably where a lot of this this sentiment towards more children is, because she doesn't feel like she can have more kids.
She doesn't want to have another baby, is what she's saying. She's had you, and she's had your sister and her sister-in-law or whatever. What is it? Are there 2 girls? Yes. Yes. So she's had her 2 daughters. She's raised you, and you're the one with all the energy. you and your sister right now, you guys are in the prime of your life. You have the most energy, and that is when God gives you young children. God doesn't give a 60-year-old woman young children for a reason. And she is there for advice and to help out. And like, I think it's a blessing to have that older support. But your mother does not have the energy to parent little children as aggressively. And so all I'm saying is, don't blame your mom. She thinks your kids are a blessing. She is stoked. There's no conflict here with what she's saying. She is fully supportive and encouraged. She doesn't want to have a baby right now.
Right.
So you need to make sure that you're ready to mother your own baby and take full responsibility for it. And then your mom's free to just support and love you and encourage you without having to raise your child.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, who knows how you got into this just kind of like situation, you know, or how the grandma got into this routine, the schedule. But I do think we've talked about this recently. Again, so many different contexts, all the disclaimers, you know, all of that. Again, I never know everybody's context, but we've experienced in our own life the necessity to sometimes not pull away relationally, not pull away emotionally from outside support, but pull away almost physically and have there be this separation so that we can develop our own capabilities, we can develop our own rhythms and routines, and ultimately our own family cult, our own home. We're not doing it to spite our families. We're not doing it, you know, with any negative sentiment. We're doing it because of what the legacy that they've built, that they've passed on to us, and we want to now continue that. And I think in order to do that, you need to have this leaving and cleaving, where you're saying these are our children. They are our like full responsibility. It's not like they're mostly our responsibility, and you know other people's. It's like they're our full responsibility. And grandparents really do have that position of like coming in, enjoying the blessing of their children's children, hopefully seeing the blessing of their children bringing up their grandchildren in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. But again, it's not ideal. Oftentimes circumstances lend to grandparents needing to step in and be physical supports, whether it's financially or just with time and energy and service, because there could be a health crisis in the family and or financial crisis. All those instances occur, obviously. But you don't want that to be the normal family routine where you're splitting the parenting time between the grandparents and the parents.
Yeah, and it sounds like your mom really obviously loves, just know, reading this, you do have your mom's full support and encouragement and love. You and your sister. It looks like she's just bending over backwards for you. And she doesn't know, it sounds like, how to say no to you. So you have to hold that boundary for yourself. She doesn't know how to say no to you. And so she assumes that if you have another baby, then it's going to be her responsibility in some form. And she doesn't know how to hold that boundary. So in order to keep your mom from resenting your kids, you're going to have to help protect your mom from saying yes to everything that's too big of a burden for her. If you want a large family, then you're going to have to take full responsibility for that and not have your mom feel the pressure. Yeah. Because all I'm hearing is your mom's feeling pressure for your decision to have children. And our parents shouldn't be feeling the pressure of us choosing to have a larger family. If we don't want them to resent them, it just sounds like you don't, you want your mom to like be stoked to see her grandkids when they come over for like a fun sleepover that month or something.
Yeah.
Okay. This is kind of a fun question. This is from a husband of one wife, father of 5 boys, and a courting advocate. And I kind of like how he put those bullet points about himself. That was a great question. Okay. I hear this argument all the time. There was stuff we needed to talk about privately and couldn't do in a group setting. So this is in the context of courting. You said that was part of your story. So can you finally answer this tough question for me? What did you need to talk about that only you two could hear? What questions? What subject? So please be honest with me. Thank you. So it's like, it sounds like a dad that's very intentional and wants to help guide his sons through this dating, maze, and wants to do it well. And it's like, so why did you guys have an issue when, if you guys aren't familiar with Elisha's and my story, we had essentially like a chaperone. We were never alone. The first time we talked when I was 18 and he was 22, 23. And then we didn't the second time. So.
Yeah. I don't know if it was impossible by any means to cover the things. And maybe we've used language like that before because that's what it seemed like in the time where we're like, there's no way we could have had these conversations in the environment that we were in. I think it was just, I had never experienced getting to know anybody in that type of like in the intentional, like I'm trying to get to know you in a different way than any other female that I've ever known, that intentional way. So the whole thing was new to me. And so it was going to be, I was going to be tripping over myself, and it was going to be awkward regardless of how involved your dad was, regardless of how many chaperones we had all the time. And I don't begrudge. We've talked about this numerous times. I mean, Katie had just turned 18. I was 23. I still, to this day, I'm like, I respect the decision your father made to have all those safeguards in place, right? All he knew is he did not want the cultural norm of, the cultural norm, even like Christian cultural norm saying, of like young adults just spending all the hours of every day and night with each other in any environment with no accountability, no chaperones, just blurry lines on what physical boundaries are supposed to be. And then hopefully you get maybe to marriage, or you make the decision to not get married with not too many regrets, with not too much, I guess, history and lines crossed. And so that is so common. It makes sense to me when fathers like your father, I think I'm probably going to lean big time this way, are lend to the extra restrictive side, right? Or they lean to the extra restrictive side. And I go back to like that principle once again, or that concept that Douglas Wilson talked about, like the shorter leash when they are very young, right? Teaching them the principles and then hopefully lengthening that leash when they are adults, and versus doing it the opposite. And it is weird how when he said that, I was like, man, that's so my instincts is to think, okay, well, it's kind of harmless now when they're 6, 7, 8, 9. But then I think back to my parents. Again, I was a sinful person. I had plenty of sin in my life, but because of the principles I was brought up with, I had standards when it came to like you and I would have not been in any, again, especially for a long time, there wasn't like sexual danger or like sin.
The first time we were both like gonna ride a squeaky clean line.
Yes.
The second time we were a little bit more
I'd say like, I don't know,
frustrated.
Yes.
And
that was like reactionary almost.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say maybe a little bit rebellious. I was. Mm-hmm. I definitely was. And that which I regret, obviously.
Yeah.
Not a little bit.
It might have been rebellion in my heart, or just like indifference, in me.
But we'd been really frustrated in our relationship by that point, by so many people being so inside our relationship that we didn't make the right decisions, and I regret a lot of the way I disrespected my father and, navigated that. And thankfully, my parents, we have great relationships with them. This now, we work through it. But I was just very frustrated and over everybody. And was just like, I'm going to go do my own thing with Elisha. I will wait for your blessing for marriage, but that's all I'm giving up at this point. Yeah. Like, I am so confident I want to marry this guy. And I was kind of over everyone's opinion. Mm-hmm. And that's a dangerous place to be with the child. And like, I pray that I don't get to that place with any of our kids when they're in a dating relationship where they're so frustrated that they kind of just like don't want to hear you out.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, trying to circle back around to the corner. I was just kind of like walking down memory lane there on our courting experience. Is I think what we would have, especially, I still think that's kind of like the ideal framework, is that a boy and a girl get to know each other in the context of a group setting, where there's tons of carefree timelessness. They get to see each other interact in serious environments, in fun and spontaneous and playful environments, really in as many environments as possible, in working environments, ministry environments, seeing them interact with older people, younger children, people their own age, their parents. Like, that's ideal, right? Because that is the true like deception that can come from only being like in those more conventional dating where it's like you just go out to dinner and you just hang out with the two of you, you watch movies, you like talk
you
about
and me in a vacuum.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not normal life.
It's not normal life. You interact with the outside world. You interact with family and with siblings, and so it's like you actually get to learn more about the person in those categories. I think when you are in group environments, I think if it doesn't, I mean, and I would, who knows what the stats are? I wouldn't be surprised if the stats for successful marriages are far higher in like more formal courting, marriages that kind of transpire through courtships. What I was going to say is I think when like courting doesn't work for people, is it's like two different people coming from two totally different contexts. Like, so like if you happen to be pursuing a girl that are brought up, so like I think courting could have worked for you and I in that. Does that make sense?
It did work for a lot of our friends.
Yeah.
And they would like hit it off, hang out in group settings, like volleyball, over on, the whole family staying up late, hanging out, asking each other questions. Like that sounds super fun and super appealing. And I got to know a lot of guys that way, and a lot of guys where we actually started relationships based on that, where it was like we had a lot of like fun, synergistic chemistry just within group settings.
Yep. Yeah, and I think it's worked. And I'm now a father. I think I was this way even before being a father. When people were like, "Hey, you just got to let young people figure it out and have fun." I've never had that attitude. I'm like, we all know how that works out, right? Like how'd that work out for you? There's usually some regret, some guilt, and also, you don't have to do a lot of the heavy lifting that leads to a stronger marriage, right? Having some of those harder conversations beforehand, if it's just unmonitored and just fun and just letting your emotions and your feelings lead everything. Anyways, I think that courtship can be very effective if both those people are coming from an environment where that is like, where to expect that. I think when it gets tricky is when one person like is coming from more of a conventional, traditional, whatever you want to call it. I don't know what the word would be, just like more of a dating environment. And then the other person's not. They start to form a friendship in group environments. And then the guy pursues the girl and is like, "Hey, I want to take you on a date." She's like, "Well, you need to talk to my dad." He's like, "Oh, okay. Well, okay, sure. If that's how we do it, I'll go talk to your dad." And then the dad like sits him down. He says, "Well, this is how we're going to do it." And oftentimes at this point, the girl's allegiance is already formed with that suitor. And now there's a huge conflict, right? And the dad's like, "Hey, you're going to do this my way, or you're going to my way or the highway." And so a bond has already been created, even in those group environments. And that's where I think a lot of relational hurt then, occurs, is because the dad, and I can see myself doing this big time. You see like basically the ego get involved with their daughter, or be like, "Hey, like you got to go through me." And that's just the way it is. And I don't think your dad ever did this. I don't want you to think that I'm
I'm just thinking about it because I have a different opinion on it, but I love your perspective.
And then I think this is where it goes poorly. That whole like trying to form is that basically two people aren't playing by the same rules. And so the girl's like, "Well, this is kind of a stupid standard. My allegiance are over here." Or oftentimes I think girls, and if they're like, "Man, you got to figure this out and go through my dad," I think a lot of relationships end prematurely, honestly, too. Where it's like that could like the guy didn't know how to do this whole courtship thing. Like this was totally out of left field. Again, it wasn't weird to me that when I would tell my friends that's like, "Yeah, I can't go on dates with Katie. I can write her a letter. I talk to her dad, every so often. We check in, hear how things are going. We hang out." They thought I was like trying to marry into a cult. Right. And these were like my Christian friends. Is the weirdest thing. But because of my upbringing, my background, I'm like, no, it's great. Like it's very healthy. And so I think it really, I don't know. I don't even know why I'm talking so much about this.
No,
but
I love it. I think it's good. People want to hear your thoughts.
Yeah.
Well, I think as you're talking, I was thinking about this, and I think a lot can happen in group settings, right? For Elisha and I, it didn't work very well because there was a lot of antagonistic, if the environment is neutral, I guess, or supportive, I think it's fun, it's great, and the couple wants to hang out with everybody else. If it's an antagonizing culture, then you don't want to be there because you feel like everything's getting judged. So like Elisha would leave and then my family would criticize him. And like, I like this guy, you know what I mean? So I just want to go have a conversation with him where they can't hear because it's so critical to this guy I like. So I think as a family, if you want to have those group settings, yes, you need to be willing to point out the big red flags. That's why all the family's there. But if you're going to nitpick a person or be really critical about someone that your daughter or your son really likes, and it's not something that's like big, as in like, you know, they aren't going to love the Lord or protect your, raise your children the way that you would want the grandchildren, the way you'd want them to be raised, or protect your daughter or respect your son or whatever the case may be, then I can see that was our situation. And so it was a pretty frustrating situation to be in. And that was, again, no fault of my family. I was the first one to get anything, have any kind of relationship. And so it was new, and everyone was just like, everyone was involved, and I can't blame them, because if it had been one of my sisters, I would have done the exact same thing, you know? So it was what it was. I do think, though, that there comes a point in the relationship where you ask, you know, I was thinking about it like, okay, was there stuff we needed to talk about privately? And I absolutely think that there is. Once you're getting close to engagement, and, you know, we would have conversations where Elisha would pull me aside and be like, hey, Katie, I felt really disrespected. In this instance, and we've talked about some of these instances, and I'm like, what? I was just having a good time. But like, is he going to do that in a group setting? Mm-hmm. Or am I going to go to him in a group setting and be like, I felt really hurt when you did this to me? Like, I felt very trivialized, or whatever the case may be. I'm not going to do that in the middle of all my family. There is a level of intimacy as you're moving closer to marriage where you become a lot more vulnerable with the other person. And I see a lot of marriages that, honestly, a lot of arranged marriages have high success rates. So I know you don't have to have this vulnerability going into marriage, and you can achieve it all on the other side. But I do think it's a blessing if you're able to have it before, because you do have those tools in your toolbox to have that vulnerability and have those hard conversations going into marriage. Another thing, you know, talking to your boyfriend or girlfriend or whatever about their sexual purity or their history. You know, am I going to ask a suitor about pornography in the front of my family? No, I'm not. You know, is he going to ask me about past relationships or things like that? No, there are certain conversations that are a lot more intimate and very vulnerable. And I do think that as it's getting closer to marriage, I think it's healthy for those conversations to happen. And those aren't group settings. Yeah. So I do think there are some. Those would be some that came to the top of my mind. I don't know what you would say, Elisha. I don't think they need to happen at all hours of the day and night. I think there can be a lot of still like boundaries around that. Yeah. Like, you're going out for dinner and you're coming home, you know, before everyone else goes to bed and hanging out with the family. You aren't staying out till way late at night. You aren't alone in someone's apartment. You aren't, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, you're not sitting in the parked car at Muldoon's Point, you know.
Muldoon's Point. So there can still be a lot of guidelines around that, but I do think that there's a deeper level of intimacy that I was really grateful to achieve before marriage. Yeah. That is emotional, not just, you know, it's not a physical level of intimacy, I guess. When we wanted to get away, it wasn't just to be like, oh, we just want to be alone physically. And I do think there's this element, though, where you need to trust your child to a certain extent. Like you said with Doug's comment of having a short leash and having a loose leash. If you've raised, you know, you have 5 boys here, they're going to be setting the sexual standard for purity in the relationship. If you can't trust your boys to a certain extent, I mean, I don't think we need to put ourselves in harm's way, but to respect a woman, then I think there's something wrong with the parenting a lot earlier on.
Well, I mean, yeah, because I want one real quick thing on what you said, and then I was going to continue on the thread that you just started. It does seem like maybe in some courtship environments or contexts, the expectation would be that those conversations that you just talked about would then start at engagement. It's like, you decide to get totally engaged, and then you can start having those conversations that you would kind of deem deeper or more intimate or needing some more privacy. Yeah. But as I was just thinking it out, it's like I think it's so much easier to hide as a creepy guy in group environments. Right. It's like so much easier to quote the scripture, to look the dad in the eye, to have a good firm handshake, to keep your hands to yourself. Like, you're going to keep your hands to yourself if you're in a living room with a ton of people. Right. unless you're a moron, honestly, you know? And so it's like, but you can be a creepy guy, keep your hands to yourself, have all sorts of weird addictions. You can have weird, whatever, tons of weird things going on.
All kinds of things.
Weird, messed up stuff that goes completely unnoticed because you're always in these group environments. And I'm not saying, the way you need to then find it out is get them alone and it'll all come out. But you'll be able to see red flags, I think, a lot sooner, right? And so, there needs to be some vetting before you let your daughter go alone on a date. But then I think with my sons too, where it's like a girl can be so, well behaved, seem so wholesome and honorable and, and modest and have integrity when they're in these groups, and they get alone and all of a sudden she's throwing herself at my son. I'd rather my son know that about her character, of course, have the integrity in the character to be like, hey, well, what's going on? And then me have a relationship with my son so that he comes back. He's like, man, that was kind of crazy. Like we got alone for like an hour and she was making advances that I wasn't really comfortable with, that I thought were inappropriate. And likewise, again, not saying you want your daughter to be ever in a dangerous situation, right? So there needs to be a certain level of vetting. But it does seem like some of those more weird things that oftentimes get overlooked in group environments can be easierly identified. They can maybe be identified sooner if there is those times of being alone. Again, like I'm not saying, you need to know if he's going to, force himself on your daughter. So that way, it's like, no, of course you vet him long before that's a possibility. But then at some point knowing like, and that's the thing too, is a creepy guy can like, he can fake for so long. Yeah. He really can't in group environments. And of course he can fake it in one-on-one environments too. Right. Like,
but
it's one more variable, I guess, that you can at least do some vetting with. I almost see it more as I'm talking it out. I see it more actually. Again, I have more sons. Like my sons, I wanted them to go on a date. Be like, how does she interact with other men? Is she flirtatious with other men? Like I said, is she making advances towards you? And I want my sons to have a relationship with them where they can come back and we can talk it out. And with my daughter, I think I'm definitely more, as I'm talking out those scenarios, I'm like,
no,
it's like, I know there has to be a level at some point, like, where again, at that point, what are you going to, pass her off in marriage to a guy that you don't know. So, I mean, I guess just my daughter dating anyone or stresses me out in general now that I think about it. Anyways, I don't know.
Well, I think there was a lot of trust that was built in our relationship with Elisha and I when we were alone before marriage. And I remember my dad questioning me about Elisha and physical boundaries and stuff like that. And I remember like thinking, I am so confident with where he is at, because honestly, I felt like I was the weaker one in the relationship sometimes. And I was like, the way that Elisha keeps me from going further than I should is so encouraging to me. And we didn't have, I don't know, I feel very blessed by our relationship and how we entered into marriage. And I felt very protected by Elisha during that time. And I felt like our relationship was very God honoring. We talk about it because it's like, it wasn't like this perfect, we kissed at the altar type of thing, but I never wanted a relationship that was like a kiss at the altar type of thing. So I don't know. I've seen it work all the ways, right? We've grown up in courtship circles and we've seen it work very well for couples. And we've seen a lot of couples that I think would have been great together never get off the ground because of the courtship scenario. Sure. And then the girl's 37 and unmarried. And I'm like, that guy would have been so cool. Right. For her, like what a bummer that her dad came in with these like unattainable standards and decided that the guy needed to date him and the daughter, and it became an ego battle, and the suitor lost, and I see that a lot as well, or I have seen that a lot.
Like it does seem like, that when you see the dad's ego, when he's like a 50-year-old man, and then all of a sudden it's like his 7th grade ego comes out when it's regarding his daughter. I'm not talking about being protective and being wise and using discernment. It's like it becomes an ego thing, and then you're like, well, that seems counterproductive at that point. Yeah. And we've seen that, but we've also seen like amazing, loving, God honoring fathers that truly just like want what's best for their daughter and are willing to like, listen to their daughter. If she's like, no, I really like this guy. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, then I really want to get to know him. Not like, oh, well, I'm going to show you how much of a loser he is. You like this guy? This guy's a chump,
Yeah.
So.
And I think like, as we're talking this out, obviously Elisha's I don't know if this is obvious or not. Our ideal for our kids is to meet someone, hang out with them in public settings, become a best friend, then be like, wow, I really like them. I would like to pursue a deeper relationship with this person. Like, that is, yes, the dream ideal.
Yeah.
It doesn't always happen as perfect as a parent would like it to happen. It just doesn't, And so I think having lived that, I'm like, okay, it's probably going to look a lot of different ways for a lot of our different kids. I think the most important things to me are that we remain keep open communication with our children, so that if something is weird or if they are feeling tempted or things are going unhealthily, they know we're an advocate and they want to come talk to us about it. They aren't like, they're the last people I'm going to tell because they're going to make us break up. Once our children are adults, that's for them to decide. If they're going to spend the rest of their life with someone. And so we want to be in that counseling position. And I don't want to be antagonistic to who my children are interested in, because I just think it immediately pits parent against child and who they have a crush on. And then you're out. As much as if you force your way in at that point, I don't see anybody winning.
Yeah. What's crazy is that in another relationship that I was in, not the one with you, okay? Not the one that ended in the most glorious marriage.
Not the one
ever.
that matters.
Not the one that matters. It's funny because whenever I felt there was antagonism from anybody in my family, then my pride got involved, right? And this happens a lot. You're kind of like, because you take it, what you're saying is like, who you have feelings for is lame, and so therefore you've got lame taste. It's like, you're like, that's kind of being communicated. And so then you're like, well, I've got to prove to you that you're wrong. Like, I don't have crushes or have feelings for somebody that's lame. And you get this very defensive, and then you're trying to prove a point, and then that sparks emotion, and emotion of any kind. Like we always talk about infatuation, but just emotion in general clouds judgment. Okay. So even if it's not like infatuation, but it's pride, and you're trying to prove, something to your parents or to your siblings or whoever it is that might be opposed, it can really complicate things. And it's funny because it wasn't until some of these people who were in my corner, that wanted what was best for me, in a lot of ways humbled themselves. And they're like, it's crazy. Like, I don't even know why we have, like, we really see what you see. We've got your back. All we want is to be supportive. We want what's best for you. Like they came behind me, and then I felt the total freedom to be like, oh, well, who am I fighting against now? Like, and I saw a lot clearer, and I was like, this isn't right. And I felt like I then made the decision to be, and again, maybe that's a guy thing, and my pride was involved, like I said, which is never ideal, but I do think that can be avoided by parents. Again, it's not saying, oh, it doesn't matter, honey, whoever you choose, we love. You're right. You don't want to be that parent that's so hands off that, doesn't give any input or isn't able to talk about red flags that they see. But that actually might be it, is it's like, you do want to be able to speak if there's red flags. And if you let every little personal preference have the same level of, severity as true red flags, then you lose your credibility, right? When there are really red flags. And I've heard that said when people are criticizing somebody that they know who's dating somebody, and they'll go through a list of things, and it's like, they'll list off like 6 things, and it's like 2 of them are like really serious, and the other 4 are such personal preferences. But when you lump them all in the same category, you lose the credibility in the other 2, right? Where it's like, oh, the way they talk, the way they, whatever, you go through a list. I'm trying to think of examples, like, and I can't really think of it, but it's like, if one of those,
I just don't feel peace.
Yeah, exactly. Just kind of like, they rub me wrong. And
because you're like, you might not feel peace because their personality drives you nuts, but you don't have to be married to them. Your child does.
Yes. But then if there is that, like, oh boy, I'm not certain about, like, I think they've got a big time misunderstanding of the gospel. I think that their view of children is not healthy or not Christian or not biblical. those are like
or
concerns.
they're chronically lying, or
yes, or you think that like, man, they are deceitful. No, those are things that are true. They can be true character flaws, right? But if you lump those into the same category as like, oh, they drink too much coffee. You know, like I cannot believe how much coffee they drink. I know your family said that about me. That's why.
Well, now like my mom makes coffee for you. She makes sure there is coffee.
No,
So
I actually wasn't thinking of your family when I said that, but just an example, you know, something like that, you know, just kind of like that red lipstick, you know, it's just, I can't believe a girl would wear that. And you're like, well, don't say that in the same breath of saying like, I think she's lying, you know, like those are,
yeah, I know. So we get, it's like, obviously picturing your own kids, we would love to have more of a courtship environment. We see a lot of benefit to that. And we do see at some point having there be some, allowing intimacy to build at some point deeper before going into marriage. And that might be engagement. For some couples, they might need that confirmation before they get engaged. Some couples might not. I think it can depend a lot on the age of who's involved too. You know, if you do have an 18-year-old daughter, that's going to look different probably than if your daughter's 25 or 26. You know, I have a single sister right now, and she just is like so rock solid in her faith and what she believes, in her boundaries and what she's looking for. And she just, you know, you just like trust her forever, you know. And then you might have like a 17-year-old girl who's in her first relationship and the guy's 5 years older, and you know, kind of like similar to us, and you're kind of like, I can see her being swept off her feet and thinking some guy's dreamy, and what if he's not all that, you know. So again, we have a lot of boys, and I just really want them to be raised to see themselves as the morality in the relationship and see themselves as the standard and the leader. And I mean, I'm sure I'm going to hate a bunch of floosy girls just throwing themselves at my boys. So we'll see how it goes.
It's crazy intimidating. And I mean, I tell you what, there's nothing, I'm sure everybody can relate to, like, you go through these cycles where you're like, we're doing good, like we're doing good in our parenting, or we're doing, and then it's like, just as soon as you feel that, you're like, we don't know a thing. Mm-hmm. And I'm currently in one of those seasons of I feel like it's because your kids are always changing, right? They're always changing. They're growing in capabilities. They're growing in bandwidth and ideas and creative ways to be deceitful and all those things. And you're like, what in the world? Like, how do I parent? Like, I thought like 6 months ago, it wasn't like this. 3 months ago, it wasn't like this. And it's like back to the drawing board with the parenting books is what it feels like. That's why it's good to like have the parenting books. That's where I'm like, they're all the same parenting books. It's just like you go through them again, I feel like, you know, and because they mean something different with each stage that your children are in. So far, that's how it's been for me. And I know many of our listeners have children that are older than our children. And I don't know, I look to you folks in person, you know, online, whatever, for wisdom, because I'm definitely in one of those seasons with my boys, with my daughter, where it's like, okay, I don't know. I don't know how to do this. I could be, people do it wrong, and I'm very capable of being one of those people that do it poorly, that do it wrong. And you raise them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord by the grace of God. But you also see that done. Yeah. So period, hard stop, by the grace of God. And you see how that is played out in different people's lives. And you're like, I want to be able to model my parenting after those whom it seems like it's been highly effective in a positive way, right? For them. And so, yeah, anyways, I said all to say, when it comes to this courtship or dating, I'm so intimidated by it. And it's so funny how we just spouted off a ton of opinions, and a lot of it's from our own experience, just from being back at that age, dating and courting age. But when it comes to what I'm going to do, it's like, oh, I have no clue, right? Like, we can talk all about how it was for us, how it could have gone different, how it could have been better, how it could have been worse, what we see other people do. But at the end of the day, it's like we sit here and talk about how this dad, you know, got his ego involved. And if I'm being honest, I'm like, well, that's more likely than not going to be me, you know, like, just no, unless the Lord just continues to work on my heart, you know, and mold me and give me wisdom. And that's, yeah, I mean, I know every parent probably prays for this, but I've prayed it more than ever over the last month, is for wisdom in parenting. Just kind of like, like how to handle these situations, how to handle these outbursts or this type of, disobedience, or how to answer these types of questions, when to introduce these types of concepts. It's a task.
It is.
And
I know it's so much easier said than done when I think about boys. And then I picture like, who knows? There are like great girls that are misled out there. And I just like, if I picture a girl coming in and I'm like, son, like, why are you attracted to her? She's wearing X, Y, and Z or whatever. And, you can just see that happening. And then, yeah, you'll just see how it goes.
yeah, I tell you what, wow. Obviously it's one of those things where you really just value humility but also intentionality. I think a lot of people disguise humility, or they try to come across as humble, but they're actually being like apathetic. They're just kind of like, oh, well, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just trusting the Lord. And so that I want to have this combination of intentionality, having the hard conversations, being able to get in the trenches with my kids as they're dating. Again, this is I feel silly talking about this because it's like I feel like from 6 months ago until now, I've been humbled like 28,000 times in my parenting. And so the thought of like thinking I might know how I'm going to parent through dating is a joke, because of how many times the Lord's going to humble me, Lord willing, between now and then. So maybe we should have led with that. It's like, you want to hear our opinion?
Caveat at the end. I would just say this. It's really hard once you become antagonistic with your adult child to have them want to hear you out. And so I'm not saying it's not hard to do, but as long as you can maintain that, I'm going to give you advice when you ask for it, and only bring up a concern if it's like a flaming red flag, then holding back and waiting for your son or daughter to get insecure about something and come to you and see your thoughts, I've seen go a lot better than in actually terminating a relationship. Like if you want the relationship terminated, it might be better to just love on your kids than try to force a termination, because it's kind of like putting... what is that stuff? Like pouring oil on a fire instead of water or salt or something. You poured the wrong thing on the fire, and sometimes it just gets bigger. And we've kind of, we both experienced digging our heels in when we've gotten that antagonistic spirit. And then once, like you said, as soon as we feel supported, it's like, whoa, all of a sudden I'm really insecure and I'm questioning my decisions here. And, because you can kind of throw the responsibility on the person that's inserting themselves. And that's one of the weaknesses I've seen with courting, I guess, is maybe that's where I've seen maybe a weakness. And then the other weakness would be on fathers just not letting viewing children as children maybe, and not letting them just be adults in the situation. Realizing at the end of the day, they're the ones who have to be married to each other.
Oh, right.
Yeah. And so if they would like to make it work, they're probably going to make it work.
Sure.
And hopefully you've raised them so that they know what their non-negotiables are. They know what their long-term vision is for family. They know that they want someone to support them in their faith a certain way. I think a lot of Christian parents get blindsided by the values their kids have or don't have when it comes to choosing a spouse.
Yeah.
And they realize, whoa, my kid does not, the problem is not who your child is picking. Your problem is they aren't that person themselves.
Right.
And they don't actually believe these foundational things that are so foundational to you.
Yeah.
And so working now to pass on your values to your child so that they're so rock solid in those, and they're looking for someone who's also rock solid in those. Yeah, emotions and infatuation happen. But at the end of the day, I think that's something that Elisha's parents and my parents did. When push came to shove, we knew the bedrock of our foundation and who we wanted in a spouse. And even though it was a little sketchy getting there, it's rang true.
Yeah.
Like they're both so grateful, all of our parents, with who we married.
Yeah.
And I think it's because they raised us.
I agree. Yeah. And I could maybe see that once again, just I'm trying to talk myself through like, what are the hangups again of courtship? Because right now it seems like the best option out there, for my kids. And I could see that being another hangup is when it's the same just with like dead religion. You're going along with you don't even get to see what your children's values are if they're always in a structured, planned environment. And they're like, yeah, this is what we do on Sunday. This is what we do on Wednesday night. This is the group activities we always participate in. And that could be one of those things that if you see that, if you only get to see the date that relationship transpire, and that you maybe don't even get to know what your children's values are, and they don't even get to know in a lot of ways too.
Well, I think a lot of parenting is so fear-based. Parents don't want to take the training wheels off, and so they force them on until marriage. And then a lot of couples have really difficult marriages because they don't even know who they are or what they believe. Instead of like the training wheels need to start coming off when they're like 12, 13, 14. Like you need to see how your daughter behaves around guys long before she's dating one, or how your son's treating women long before he's dating one.
Yeah.
Going back to that conversation, I think a lot of parents start to freak out when they see how their children are interacting with the opposite sex once they're in a relationship. And it's like, well, it's too late. Yeah.
And that is, again, yeah, it is just interesting. I'm getting stressed out now about any of my kids getting married because it's just...
No, it's a wonderful thing.
It is.
And that's the one thing is no one is above incredible infatuation and physical attraction that does blind you. And so I do think that speaking with your child about intentional times when they can be alone together, that is still wise, like putting yourself in wise situations. That's the thing. They can be in public, but still be outside of like maybe your family.
Maybe that's what it's going to be. We just cracked it. That's what it is. I know. Cause I'm like, man,
it gets... restaurant is not the problem.
Right.
It's like in the car after dark, after the restaurant.
Yes.
We had our first kiss in a Ralph's parking lot.
It's a grocery store.
Yeah. In the car. You know what I'm saying? Like it wasn't, and I don't regret that. I do regret the attitude I had, but it was great. But I think it's the times when you're like totally, totally alone where you're going to be the most tempted. Yeah. So how can you set up times where you're, daylight hours, public settings?
Yeah, maybe you like drive separate. It's like, hey, let's meet for
Honestly, that wouldn't be a bad
dinner.
idea.
Yeah, we just figured it out.
Cars were when we were the most like, this is so hard. Can our engagement be, okay, our engagement be like, 2 weeks?
Yeah, I think that if you drive separate cars, it solves all the problems. We just figured it out. Okay.
Okay, we are done talking tonight.
You guys have an awesome night.
You know what the nice thing is? We're married, so now we get to go to bed together tonight.
Yes. All right. Talk to you next time. Bye-bye.